Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, news, business, and self-development. Every month, members get 1 credit to pick any title, plus 2 Audible originals from a monthly selection, and access to daily news digests from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, as well as guided meditation programs. Between a full-time job in IT and a full-time job in podcasting, it gets harder and harder to sit down and read the books I'm interested in. This is where Audible comes in. I can listen on my daily commute, relaxing, or while out running errands and still get in the books I've been wanting to get into. You can download titles and listen offline anytime, anywhere. The app is free and can be installed on all smartphones and tablets. Now you can try Audible risk-free with a special 30-day free trial by visiting audibletrial.com/Nerdery and Murdery. That's audibletrial.com/Nerdery and Murdery. Don't let your busy life get in the way of that great book you've been wanting to read. Go get your free trial of Audible today. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. This is Jeffrey, and we've talked about many times before that I experience problems and struggles with my mental health. And really, without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy does work. It's helped for me, but what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, or you're not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's really time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles, and it's time to start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is a customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. So join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. And there's a special offer to Nerdery and Murdery listeners. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/Nerdery and Murdery. That's betterhelp.com/Nerdery and Murdery. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. Okay, welcome to Bonus Murdery episode number 2.
Bonus Murdery.
This episode will come out on November 10th, so very quick to record and put it out there. For today, my information came from Criminal Minds Wiki, Investigation Discovery, Evil Kin Season 2, Episode 6, No Remorse, Oxygen True Crime, Murderpedia, Free Republic, Sword and Scale, Wikipedia, The Cinemaholic, and a second article on Wikipedia. Before we get into it, I want to give a trigger warning for our listeners. This story deals with violence and rape, kind of extreme violence.
Oh, no.
Just wanted to make sure to give a warning before anyone started listening and went into the story unaware.
Right on.
I say once again, I've never lied to you when I give these warnings, so if you choose to carry on, you've been warned. So, it's the early morning hours of December 15th, 2000, and a Wichita, Kansas couple was woken up by someone pounding at their door. There was a woman at the door who was seeking shelter from the sub-zero winter temperatures. She was naked and bleeding from the head. She told the couple that she and her friends had been shot. And the man started to call 911, and the woman snatched the phone from him and started crying. She said, "I need to tell you my story before I die." So this is the story of the Wichita Massacre, or the Wichita Horror, which took place over a week in December of 2000.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. As I said, I'm not going to lead you astray. This is kind of a tough one to get through.
Yeah, when you open with "Don't call the police, I need to tell you my story before I die."
I know that one just gave me goosebumps. The second I had read that. So we're going to start off with Reginald and Jonathan Carr. They were born in 1978 and 1980, respectively, two brothers. And they were born to two young teenage parents in Dodge City, Kansas. Their mother, Janice Harding, was only 16 when Reginald was born, and their father was only 17. So very young kids. They had a sister, Regina, who died of leukemia at 2 years old. And the death of their sister is when things really began to break in the family. Things got very harsh for the two boys. Their parents would fight a lot and turn extremely violent against each other. And then they also began to withdraw from the boys and start drinking very heavily, really leaving the boys alone quite a bit. The couple did divorce, and their father completely abandoned them. So he went ghost. Janice did go on to a second marriage, which was just as violent as the first, with her second husband one time even putting a gun to her head during a fight.
Wow.
Janice herself would succumb to fits of rage and would punish the boys by using electrical cords as punishment tools. Sometimes the boys would be made to strip naked for the whippings and being held down by the other sibling. So this was very, very rough childhood. Sometimes the boys would live with their grandmother, as Janice would often just disappear. And their grandmother was also prone to sudden bursts of rage, which she would then take out on the boys. So not easy growing up for these two. But as as we kind of get into the story, they relied on each other. Jonathan more so. Reginald was really the leader of both of them, and Jonathan really relied on his brother.
Reginald being the older one?
Reginald being the older one. Okay. The Carr brothers would turn to alcohol while in elementary school, and also began having sex in elementary school.
What?
Yeah. And later psychologists said that this stunted the boys' adult personality development and impaired their sexual control and made them aroused by deviant sexual behavior.
Okay.
Drugs were also a part of their lives. When their mother was around, she'd smoke marijuana and use cocaine. And some of these drugs were obtained from Reginald. He began holding drugs for dealers at age 11, and by age 13, he was selling.
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, like I said, this kind of life was hardening the boys. Reginald would solve problems at school with violence almost every single day. And he was once suspended in the 8th grade for sexually harassing a teacher. Psychiatrists did say that Reginald was devoid of any feelings and unable to relate to other individuals except for his brother. So as I've been researching more and more into the psychology of murderers and criminals, I did come across something called the dark triad.
Okay.
This was interesting. In psychology, the dark triad comprises of personality traits of narcissism,
Machiavellianism.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And psychopathy.
Okay.
Or psychopathy. I'm sorry, it's how it's pronounced. They said that people that score high on these traits are more likely to commit crimes, cause social distress, and create severe problems for an organization.
Okay.
Reginald. All three of these traits share characteristics such as lack of empathy, interpersonal hostility, and interpersonal offensiveness.
Okay.
So while I didn't find that psychologists specifically said anything about brothers in the dark triad, I did find this interesting, and really most likely Reginald really fell into this dark triad.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that seems to cop with the story so far.
Yeah.
I know we say it all the time, but if you don't want to raise serial killers, don't beat your kids.
Right.
Maybe don't abandon them either. Or use them as your drug supplier.
Right. I mean, there was a lot of things going against these two.
Good Lord.
Their life was hard from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And nothing really seemed to get better for them. Reginald got suspended another time in the 9th grade for beating up a teacher.
For beating up a teacher?
Yes.
Wow.
And by 13, he was a gang member.
Okay.
Jonathan, meanwhile, was very different.
Okay.
He would hold his feelings in, and depression became a part of his life. And this is very common when you can't release your emotions, that those internal feelings just sit there and fester. And in him, it caused quite a bit of depression. At age 7, he tried to commit suicide by hanging himself.
At 7? Dude, I have a 7-year-old at home. The idea of that. Yeah.
At 16, he tried it again by drinking antifreeze.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So like I said, things obviously very much twisted these boys. They had no sense of right or wrong. Nobody ever taught it to them. They often vandalize just to have something to do or shoot animals with BB guns. Hurting creatures. That's something we'll actually talk about in another episode. I'm not going to get into it much here, but another thing I found out was called the McDonald triad. I think it is from a psychologist named McDonald. And I'll get into that another time.
Okay.
One time they shot each other with BB guns because they couldn't find any animals to shoot. Reginald was actually shot in the head and still has a BB lodged in his head to this day.
Wow.
By 17 years old, Reginald had had dozens of suspension under his belt, and he had dropped out of school.
Okay.
He began living on couches and had a series of failed marriages, and he cared about 2 things in life: women and money. Reginald landed in jail for the first time for burglary and drug possession, which left Jonathan alone. And he did. He wandered alone without his father figure brother. He would go from job to job or friend to friend, place to place, just trying to feed himself, keep a roof over his head because he really didn't know what to do.
Oh wow!
And
he had not. It sounds like he had never ever gotten the tools that he needed to succeed.
Correct.
Ever.
Correct. Neither one of them did.
Oh, I feel for these kids.
Well, and so all Jonathan could do was sit and wait until his brother was released from jail. That's all he had.
Oh, dear.
So Reginald would be released after a year in prison in the fall of 2000. At this time, the boys were 23 and 20. There was no rehab for Reginald while he was in prison. He actually became more violent while in prison. One night after Reginald was released, the brothers went to a club and they met a nurse that they became very, very enamored with. She was pretty. She was attracted to the boys. She had money. They thought she had it all. She was from Wichita, and the brothers felt they needed to be in Wichita so they could score some big time cash. So off they went.
Okay.
It was once they got to Wichita, they began developing a plan. They hooked up with the nurse and had her take them around the city. And they scouted out all the quote-unquote rich areas of the city and determined that the east side of town was where all the money was because that's where they saw the fancy cars.
Okay.
Reginald had brought a gun with them that he purchased in Dodge City, and the two began following people with fancy cars and decided they would rob them.
Okay.
On December 7th, 2000, at 9:15 p.m., Andrew Schreiber, who was a 23-year-old assistant baseball coach, he was getting gas at a convenience store in northeast Wichita, and he had a late model SUV. The Carr brothers saw Andrew in the SUV and determined he had to have money, so decided Andrew was their target. Andrew finished getting gas and got into the SUV, and right as he was beginning to turn on the ignition, Reginald came up and stuck a gun in the window and hit Andrew in the head with the gun. Reginald then got in and told Andrew to drive while Jonathan followed behind in the car.
Okay.
Reginald had Andrew drive to ATMs and withdraw money.
Okay.
And they drove to multiple ATMs until the account was drained.
Okay.
Then then Reginald had Andrew drive to the edge of town into a remote patch of land. He made Andrew get out and took Andrew farther into the field. Reginald made Andrew get on his knees and then began pistol whipping him. The beating stopped, and Andrew heard a single gunshot followed by 3 more. And it took him a moment to realize he had not been shot, and he heard the cars drive away. What Reginald had done is shot out the tires of the SUV, and then he drove away, leaving Andrew stranded in the field.
Naked?
No, he was not naked.
Oh.
No.
Oh.
No, we haven't gotten there yet.
Okay. Oh, that's right. The girl was naked.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm with you.
No, Andrew lived through this one. The Carr brothers then drove back to Wichita, and they began partying in clubs like they didn't have a care in the world. After 2 days of partying, the money ran out. But the boys knew how to get more, so they started scouting their next target. On Monday, December 11th at approximately 9:30 p.m., Ann Walenta had just parked her SUV in front of her house. She was the mother of 2 grown daughters, a librarian by day and a cellist in the symphony at night. She had just returned from rehearsal when Reginald approached the SUV, calling for help. He banged on the window, which scared Ann, and she put the SUV in reverse to try and escape, but Reginald fired multiple shots into the SUV, which struck Ann.
Oh.
Ann slumped onto her horn, which began blaring and prompted a neighbor to call 911, which made Reginald and Jonathan run away because the ambulance, they could already hear the ambulances arrive. Ann was rushed to the hospital and was clinging to life, but she was now paralyzed from the waist down.
Oh.
So then on a snowy afternoon on December 14th, the Carr brothers were driving around drinking and trying to figure out what their next big score was. I couldn't find a lot here about their money situation for the days leading up to this, because we were talking from December 7th was when they got Andrew to December 14th.
That's a week.
And the money ran out after a couple of days. They didn't get anything from Ann, so I'm assuming they either probably stole the liquor they were drinking or they robbed someone else prior to this, but I don't have any information on it.
Yeah. Maybe they spent all their money on the liquor and the other stuff, and it's just in the trunk of the car.
Well, but I mean, they're driving around. They got to have gas too.
That's true.
So they got some extra money from somewhere. Maybe they borrowed it from the nurse. I don't know. I don't know. It was interesting that I didn't find anything about that 7 days where they got more money. They then drove around until dark, and they again began tailing expensive cars, thinking that one of them is going to be their next big bank, target. At approximately 10:45 p.m., they saw a woman leaving a nice restaurant, and she got into an expensive car, another SUV. And they figured she was their next victim. They did begin tailing her, but she spotted them and became suspicious. So when she got close to home, she called her daughter, who was home, and told her to open the garage so she could just drive right in and get off the street.
Right on.
The Carr brothers saw the SUV pull into the garage of a triplex, and then the garage door shut, but they weren't deterred.
Okay.
They went to the front of the triplex and decided they knew which door was the woman's, and they went right up and knocked. What they didn't know is they were at the wrong house. The woman was one door over.
She was one door over.
And that's what saved her. Inside the triplex door, there was a party going on.
Okay.
Inside was Brad Haka, 28 years old, Heather Mueller, 25, Aaron Sander, 29, Jason Beaufort, 26, and Jason's girlfriend, Holly, in quotes. Her name is never given.
Okay.
She was 25 years old, and there was a dog, Nikki, who was all inside the residence.
Having a party.
Yeah. Holly's name isn't disclosed because of a policy of protecting survivors of sex crimes. Okay. So, spoiler, this is our woman from the beginning of the story.
Okay.
Aaron, Jason, and Brad.
So Holly is a pseudonym.
Yes, Holly is a pseudonym.
Okay.
I saw several sites. They gave her different pseudonyms. Holly seems to be the one that sticks.
Okay.
Sticks the most. Jason, Aaron, and Brad were all three best friends from college. They were young professionals. They were teachers, coaches, and one of them was even an aspiring priest.
Okay.
They were having a dinner party, and Jason was planning to propose to Holly. The ring was upstairs in his room.
Okay.
At just after 11 p.m., there was a knock on the door, and Aaron went to answer, and as he opened, the door crashed in, and the Carr brothers stormed in, demanding cash, and asked if anyone else was inside. Once the Carrs determined everyone was accounted for, they forced the 5 friends into a bedroom and told them all to get on the ground. Reginald began yelling at them, asking, where's the safe? Where's the safe? But they were told, hey, we don't have a safe.
We don't have a safe.
Again,
we're teachers.
He thought these were rich people, so there had to be a safe,
Yeah, because, yeah.
So once the Carrs realized there wasn't a safe, they decided to improvise, and they ordered everyone to take off their clothes and forced them into a closet where they locked the 5 friends while the Carrs went to go search the house for valuables.
Okay.
One of the Carrs found the diamond ring and began talking about it, which was overheard in the closet. And this just tears me up. Holly looked at Jason, who then told her, I bought that ring to propose to you.
Oh.
That part tore me up in there. Just the terror they must be feeling. And he tells her, that's what this ring was. I was just, man. When they couldn't find anything much else of value, Reginald took one person at a time out of the closet and started driving them around to ATMs to withdraw money, while Jonathan stayed behind the others holding him at gunpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Reginald took each person down the garage and used Jason's truck so the neighbors never saw anything suspicious, and Reginald did this over and over again for hours.
Uh-huh.
Can you imagine the terror?
Oh, yeah.
When it was Holly's turn in the truck, she asked Reginald if they were going to kill them, and Reginald replied, nah, we just want to take your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So back at the house, Jonathan is alone.
Uh-huh.
He's holding them at gunpoint.
Uh-huh. It's one guy and, 5 people?
4, because Reginald's taking one out at a time.
Yeah.
Something inside Jonathan snapped. For the first time, Jonathan felt in control instead of his brother. He had the gun. He had these people. He had them terrified.
Uh-huh.
So the first thing he did is he took Heather out of the closet, took her into the bathroom where he raped her.
Oh.
Reginald then returned with Holly and decided to join in. Both women were repeatedly raped. The men were then brought out and forced to perform sex acts on the women. The women were forced to perform sex acts on each other. And then Reginald and Jonathan beat the men with a golf club that they found in the house and forced them to have sex with the women again. Again, extreme violence.
Wow. I'm glad you gave a little a caveat at the beginning of this episode.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I had to, because this is horrifying. So the 5 victims were then ordered to put on shirts, and they were taken down the garage where they loaded them into Aaron's vehicle. Reginald drove the vehicle out of the garage, and Jonathan followed close behind, and they drove to a soccer field at the northeast part of town. And I didn't read this anywhere or see in the documentary, but I wonder if this is the same field where they took Andrew.
Oh, yeah.
Just curious.
Okay.
The closest homes were at least a mile away from this field.
Okay.
All the hostages were ordered out of the vehicle and told to get on their knees, facing away from the cars, just like they did with Andrew.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly Aaron screamed out, please God, no, don't do this. And then 5 shots were fired and all the hostages went down. Everyone was motionless, but the Carrs decided to ensure they were all dead and drove over them with Jason's truck. The Carrs then went back to the house to finish robbing it of any remaining items. And in the process, they also shot the dog, Nikki. Back at the soccer field, Holly opened her eyes. She had been playing dead the entire time to ensure the Carrs were gone. Can you imagine this? She's laying in the snow.
She's been shot.
Barely dressed, bleeding,
and
then run over by a truck, but she's still able to remain motionless until the Carrs were gone. I mean, just unbelievable.
Yeah.
What saved her? This is the most incredible thing. She had a butterfly clip in her hair, and by pure chance, the bullet struck the clip, shattered it, and grazed her head, but didn't actually enter it.
Okay.
She was saved by a hair clip. That part of it is just amazing to me.
Okay.
Holly did call out to everyone, but didn't get any answer. They were all dead except Jason, who was still breathing. Holly took off her shirt and wrapped Jason's head, hoping to save him. And then she looked across the field and saw the houses in the distance with the Christmas lights. I think the Christmas lights saved her.
But they were a mile away.
They were a mile away.
So she walked a mile in the snow with a head wound after being run over by a car and brutalized.
Not walk. She ran. She ran. She knew she had to get help for Jason.
Wow.
She had blood loss from the gunshot.
Yes.
She had been run over, but she knew she had to get help. It was almost 2:30 in the morning, and she knew she was running out of time, so she ran. She ran across the field. She climbed a fence of barbed wire, and every time she saw car lights, she ducked down, thinking the cars had returned. She ran for approximately a mile until she saw a house with the lights on, and that's when she began banging on the door. She told the couple inside their story, that we talked about at the beginning, and they called 911. And Holly was taken to the hospital while police raced to the scene of the murders, but unfortunately by that point, Jason had died.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Reginald and Jonathan were back at the house, and they were loading up Jason's truck and Aaron's sedan with everything in the condo they could sell. They each got into one of the vehicles and drove off into separate directions. The police immediately began a manhunt for the killers. They announced to the media that killers were on the loose, who were very dangerous. They gave descriptions of the cars that they got from Holly, as well as description of the stolen vehicles. But the brothers were completely oblivious to this manhunt. They didn't watch the news, apparently. Reginald was casually unloading the stolen goods at his nurse girlfriend's apartment in broad daylight. A neighbor saw Reginald, recognized the truck that matched the description on the news, so he called police. Police did arrive within minutes and surround the apartment. Reginald tried to escape out of a bedroom window, but there were police there waiting to immediately cuff him and arrest him. Jonathan, meanwhile, had gone to his girlfriend's house, his girlfriend's mother's house, and he crashed. The mother saw the news on TV, and she carefully checked Jonathan's pocket and found a wad of cash. So she went across the street and called 911, and Jonathan was arrested minutes later. Back at the hospital where Ann Walenta was, the cellist that was shot, the police did bring in lineup photos, and she was able to identify Reginald. Unfortunately, though, she did succumb to her injuries, and she died. That brought the death toll to 5.
Wow.
The trial of the Carr brothers started in October 2002. Neither brother testified, which we've talked about before, is very common. It was reported that they both seemed relaxed and comfortable during the hearings, that they actually treated the trial as a joke. Reginald would wink and blow kisses at the prosecution, and at one point he even scooted his chair next to the prosecutor and began rubbing his leg on hers. This is where I talked about the whole dark triad. There's no remorse.
No.
These two are complete psychopaths.
So basically we built two monsters.
Yes.
As a society, we built two monsters.
At one point, it got so bad at the trial that Reginald had to be cuffed and shackled just so the trial could continue.
Wow.
Holly did testify at the trial, and it was reported she testified with no emotion and just stated the facts, which was most likely the most damning thing against the Carrs.
Yeah.
Reginald and Jonathan were convicted on all 113 counts against them, including kidnapping, robbery, rape, 4 counts of capital murder, and 1 count of first-degree murder.
Okay.
They were sentenced to death plus life in prison with decades to serve before being eligible for parole.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm assuming death plus life is in case your death sentence is overturned.
Yeah. If we're going to overturn the death sentence. Okie dokie. They're still not getting out.
There's still life. Yeah. They did file an appeal in 2013 to reverse their death sentence. And there has been continuing attention for the Carr's case because of various rulings about Kansas death penalty law and decisions by its high court on such cases.
Okay.
In 2004, the Kansas Supreme Court overturned the state's death penalty law, but the state attorney general appealed this ruling to the U.S. Supreme Court. It did uphold the constitutionality of the state's death penalty law, which returned the Carrs and other condemned killers back to death row. On July 25th, 2014, the Kansas Supreme Court announced it had overturned the Carrs' death sentence on appeal. The 6-justice majority said they did so because the trial judge failed to adequately separate the penalty proceedings for each defendant.
Mm-hmm.
According to a release from the Kansas Supreme Court Public Information Officer, the court unanimously reversed three of each defendant's 4 capital convictions because jury instructions on sex crime-based capital murder were fatally erroneous, and 3 of the multiple homicide capital murder charges duplicated the first. All kinds of legal mumbo-jumbo there. The High Court did uphold most of the convictions against each of the brothers, despite their purported lower court errors. The court ruled that the brothers were entitled to separate sentencing trials as, quote, differentiation in the moral culpability of 2 defendants can cause a jury to show mercy to one while refusing to show mercy to the other. Even if the death penalties were not upheld, each of the Carrs were already sentenced to serve at least 70 to 80 years in prison before being served eligible for parole.
Okay. They were covering their bases, basically.
Yeah. The Kansas Attorney General appealed the High Court's ruling to the U.S. Supreme Court, which in March 2015 agreed to hear the Carrs' sentencing case. In January 2016, the United States Supreme Court, in an 8-1 ruling, reinstated the death sentences, overturning the Kansas Supreme Court and deciding that neither the jury instructions, which were challenged by the Carrs' legal counsel, nor the combined sentencing proceedings violated the Constitution.
Okay.
The brothers remained on death row until May 2021, when they went before the Kansas Supreme Court again. Over the years, Jonathan Carr's defense was based around him not being in control of his mental abilities during the crimes. His defense claimed that Reginald was the main perpetrator of the crimes. I disagree with that. Furthermore, even the U.S. Supreme Court determined that they should be tried together. Jonathan's attorney wanted separate trials, and even Reginald's attorney argued that that joint trial led to the harsh death sentences. And although the case went back to the Kansas Supreme Court in 2021 for the judges to decide on petitions left unaddressed in the 2014 hearing, both Reginald and Jonathan remain incarcerated in the El Dorado Correctional Facility in Butler County, Kansas.
Okay.
So as of this year. This case did get considerable criticism in the media for their coverage of the case. The victims were white. The Carr brothers were black. But the district attorney held that there was no prima facie evidence of a racial crime. Based on the robberies, Sedgwick County District Attorney Nola Foulson decided against treating these incidents as hate crimes. Conservative media commentators said the crimes were downplayed. They felt the national media suppressed the story due to political correctness. And Thomas Sowell, an African-American conservative, has said the media has a double standard regarding interracial offenses, tending to play up vicious crimes by whites against blacks, but play down equally vicious crimes by blacks against whites. Years later, the Wichita Eagle commented that the deaths of 4 black people who were murdered by a young black man 8 days before the Wichita Massacre in 2000 received less general media coverage than the murders that the Carrs did.
Okay.
In this case, Cornelius Oliver, who was 19, killed his girlfriend, Rayshonda Wheaton, who was 18, at her house, as well as her roommate Dessa Ford and friends Jeremy Levy and Quincy Williams, who were visiting the women. Oliver shot the men in the back of the head when they sat on a couch, and the couple was known to have a violent, volatile relationship. The police arrested Oliver that same day with blood still on his shoes. And some members of the black community questioned why the murders of 4 young blacks were superseded by attention given to the Carrs brothers' killing of 4 white people. A relative of Rayshonda asked, how could one be worse than the other if the results, multiple deaths, were the same?
Yeah.
The deaths of Wheaton and her friends were characterized by Oliver having a personal relationship with at least one of his victims, unlike the Carrs, who chose their victims at random. In addition, the Carrs committed rapes as well as other assaults and abuses to the victims, but there was no torture or sexual component to the Wheaton case. Oliver was convicted of the 4 murders and is serving life in prison with no possibility of parole before 2140. So the last I have here, to end on some positive news, because I rarely do.
Okay.
Heather Mueller, one of the unfortunate slain, was a preschool teacher at St. Thomas Aquinas Catholic School. The school established an annual award, the Heather Mueller Love of Faith Award, giving to a deserving 8th grade student in her memory.
Oh.
And during the trial, Holly and Andrew, remember the first victim, became friendly and began dating.
Okay.
They married in 2004, and Holly went on to be awarded Teacher of the Year.
Well, awesome.
So, little happiness at the end, and, of otherwise a very extremely terrible story.
It seems awful, and it seems awful all the way around, from the beginning to the end.
Oh, I agree. These boys were never given a chance.
No.
They never had they never had a chance to learn right from wrong. Number one, because they didn't have anybody around who
It doesn't sound like they got any. It doesn't sound like they got any tools to be productive members of society.
No, not
which
at all.
is fairly common.
Well, they grew up in violence. They learned violence themselves, and that's all they knew.
I was watching a show last night by Charlemagne the God, where he talks about healing. The episode, I think, was actually called Heal. The name of the show is The God's Honest Truth, and I'm not pronouncing that right. I'm sorry. But it basically talks about how in the culture, it's been concerned with surviving trauma for so long that they forget to talk about healing from it.
Sure.
That maybe if we take the approach, instead of looking at it as a black or white issue, as a human issue,
right,
that we all need to be healthy, happy, and okay.
Well, and healing is so important.
Yeah.
I've said here that I'm seeing a psychiatrist, and because I've had trauma in my life, and that's actually what my psychiatrist wants us to focus on is healing and forgiveness versus the pain. And it's a great point. I don't know how I'm going to get there.
You'll figure it out.
I suppose.
I think talking about this stuff is helping both of us.
I wouldn't disagree. And it's funny that I'm seeing a psychiatrist as interested in as I am in psychology. I actually wanted to be a psychologist once.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
My later years in high school, I actually considered going into psychology. Because one of the things that I do is I like listening to people, and I try to give my advice where I'm not a licensed therapist, so maybe I shouldn't, but that's just kind of what I've done my whole life. But yeah, healing is what my psychiatrist wants to focus on. So I completely agree with that, and then I completely agree with the human issue as well. We need to treat everybody as humans. We do not need to treat everybody as different races, as different sexes, as whatever.
Oh my God. The two most distant human beings on the planet. So say you got somebody in Australia and somebody up in Antarctica, right? Or the Arctic, right? We are more closely related those two people are more closely related genetically than two chimpanzees that live in the same tree.
I did not know that.
Yes. Not only that, we share something like 95% of our genes with those same chimpanzees. So we are really close together genetically.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's some of current society that I agree with, that I'm okay with. I struggle with the what is it called? Gender identification. I struggle with that a little bit. Not that it's right or wrong in any way, but
it's hard to keep track.
It is, and I hate feeling bad when somebody calls me out on it. But I'm like, I didn't know. No, I'm not trying to be bad. And that's what's so hard sometimes. But so back to Reginald and Jonathan. I completely agree with you. This is another one where I guess you can say society failed. It's more of a case is these two never had a chance.
No. No, they did not. Well, generational poverty probably plays a pretty darn heavy role in this too.
Maybe. They just it is sad that they were never given a chance, and it is sad that their environment seems to be what turned them to the dark side.
Oh yeah,
their environment that turned them to the violent people they became, and just so, for lack of a better term, battle hardened.
Yeah.
For what they did for the rest of their lives. And it's a sad story all the way around, from what created these two to the atrocities that they did.
Yeah.
And was just awful. So it was a hard story, but like I said, that's why I kind of warned people right at the beginning.
Yeah, right on. Thank you for that.
Yeah, because I know there's some that may skip past those kind of ones because they're very difficult.
They're dark.
So with that, that takes us to the end of our bonus episode for this week.
Bonus Murdery.
Or this month, actually, I'm sorry. Our second bonus episode. As always, you can find more information on our website. We do post pictures and links to our episodes. You can find our social media as well as our contact information. If you want to send us any email, contact us about episodes, tell us what you liked. Do comment on Facebook as well. I'd love to see discussion groups begin on some of the stuff we tell.
Yeah,
and see what people think about it. I'd really love to see that. Don't forget that it's very important that you rate us wherever you can. It helps us. It helps get our content out to people. We also have our merchandise on our webpage where you can show off your Nerdery and Murdery logo merchandise.
Yes.
We have our Patreon where if you would like to help us with the cost of the show, that also is very much appreciative.
Please and thank you.
Please and thank you. So you can find all of that on nerderymurdery.com. And with that, I have been Jeffrey with your Murdery.
And I have been Zig with your color commentary.
All right.
Cue the music.